Hey guys, I'm Cecylia,
Hi, I'm Alexandra.
and this is Shelf Absorbed Podcast.
So this is our first episode of 2025, which is
Bow, 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 bow,
exciting.
bow, bow.
New year. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. We're actually going to be doing a little bit of like a bonus content with Fourth Wing as well as Iron Flame, kind of going into a general recap of both stories, what happens without going into all the explicit details because there's so many, and then figuring out debunking some or supporting some theories that are pretty popular in the series right now, as well as what we think is going to happen in the next book. So moving into it, we can go ahead and start with Fourth Wing. We meet with Violet Sorengale. She's our main character. You get to follow Violet as she comes into Basgath War College. She is the daughter of General Lilith Sorengale, who is a high-ranking military officer. There's multiple different quadrants or within Basgath War College. The riders, scribes, healers, and the infantry. Violet, essentially her family believes that she's going to be thought she would be a scribe. That's what her father was, but she ends up joining the riders quadrant. We kind of meet her when she's about to start this first daunting task of crossing the parapet.
And she's forced into it. And her siblings are, her brother Brennan at this point, and we believe him to be dead. And her sister is very much against this, her older sister Mira.
But when she gets there, she meets Jack Barlowe, who becomes her adversary. She meets Rhiannon, who becomes her friend, and she meets Xaden, who she has been told to stay away from, as there's a very, very complex history between Xaden and her family, or the Riorsan
He's
family and
the
hers.
hottest man alive. So immediately I was like, we need to get to know him actually. And the book, I'm like, we're gonna go into this cute little dragon book. This is gonna be so much fun. And that poor Dylan guy got the book got so dark in that moment. Like, I remember being like, okay, we're in her mom's office. It was giving Dumbledore, Harry Potter vibes. Like, that was what I was imagining. And they're walking across the parapet, which it took me until Iron Flame to Google even what a parapet was. But then this Dylan guy just like falls to his death. And I was like, surely he'll come back. We don't kill people in books. This is just for fun. We're reading for fun. And he never came back. Spoiler, Dylan's still a goner. But the book got really dark really fast for me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was only within the first, 15 pages that he gets tossed right off. And then you learn that
Wow,
this
he
happens.
falls.
Oh, he falls.
Lame.
Right. Right. Oh, what a loser.
Which I was like lame because I was picturing this big giant roof. And a parapet is actually like a balance beam. So it's slippery, it's a balance beam, it's thin. I had no
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
It's
come on, Dylan.
raining. There's so much happening. And reading that, I thought, wow, this is so neat and cool. But I would be a scribe. I would not be walking the parapet plank.
I wouldn't even be here. Once in Iron Flame, when we were introduced to like just a different world outside of Navarre, I'd be over there with like the Griffin riders.
And it's a very challenging task. We learn a lot of people die at any point in time going to this war college. Just getting over onto the campus is a difficult task in and of itself.
Yeah, and it's specifically with the riders quadrant. So it's not necessarily across the full campus, but one of the things that it's a theme that we're introduced to kind of it's present very much in the beginning, but this theme of grief and how Navarre handles grief and how they train their citizens to grieve and understand, loss, we learn as the novel goes on is very dark. So grief is when someone passes away in Navarre in the War College, their process is at the end of the day just to read out a death toll and you burn all of that person's belongings. So Rebecca Yarros in interviews has been describing that like there is supposed to be this very dark contrast. It's not supposed to be normal because the protagonist, Violet Sorengale, is struggling in both novels, she's kind of struggling on and on as this manifests. Like, she loses people. There was the girl that dropped during one of the final challenges. She's reaching for her hand and like making eye contact with this woman as she falls. And so it gets darker and darker for Violet, but it also, like, that means it's bottling up more and more. And one of the things Rebecca said for Onyx Storm that we'll see is kind of like that, what that looks like when you can't properly grieve a loss. Because Violet, as once she's exposed to the Rider's Quadrant over the next two books, is just taken on, like, she's losing people left and right. And the way that Navarre is kind of trying to teach their citizens to handle grief and loss is it's not normal. And they learn that when they meet the Griffin Riders, and the Griffin Riders have this very strong reaction to the death toll reading. And there's also the chapter in Iron Flame where the Dragon Riders and the Griffin Riders are talking, and they're realizing that at the Griffin Riders at their college, when somebody falls off a griffin or like fails a challenge, the Dragon Riders are like, oh yeah, and then they die. That's hard to see your friends die. And the Griffin Riders are like, what? That's horrific. No, they fall into the water and they swim to shore and they find a new major. Like, and you talk to them at graduation, So it'll be interesting to see the manifestation of that, and how the characters that we currently know and love learn that that's not normal. It's not normal to be so cold and standoffish when you're hurting and when you're grieving someone's loss.
Right. And we see this so early on in Fourth Wing, and the older students don't even bat an eye. They don't react.
Because they're like conditioned at that point by the process.
Yeah, they don't react at all. It's very jarring, especially to Violet and to the new students that are coming into school. It's very shocking to them. But she makes it across the parapet. She officially becomes a cadet. Once she crosses, you meet her childhood friend, Dane Atos, who does not want Violet to be here. He tries to convince her multiple times to go to the scribe quadrant. That's what she should do. Violet does not listen to him.
Yeah, this is an interesting character dynamic because it's one of those things where you're kind of hearing the unsaid. I think Violet starts to get frustrated, as she should. There's a contrast. So we're introduced kind of to these two love interests right off the bat. We're introduced to Xaden, and then we're introduced to Dane, and Dane is very like good boy, doesn't text in class, is like rule follower, and then Xaden is like the bad boy, like stay away from him, but also he's like the hottest thing you've ever seen, and just has like a dark, shadowy presence and always looks pissed off. So immediately I'm jumping in that bucket. But when we're introduced to these two romantic love interests, it's interesting to kind of zoom out and think of who Violet is as a person and where she would have, like, what relationship would challenge her and push her more. And you see immediately the answer to that with Dane being like, go back home, go where you're safe, keep your head down, hood up, literally, and just focus on what you're good at, what you know. This place is too dangerous for you. You're not capable of this. And then Xaden, while he still doesn't even like her, is explaining to her that Dane's like off his rocker with that. And he's already empowering her even when he doesn't like her. So I think that the story would have gone really differently as far as Violet's internal dialogue. And I think that it goes to show kind of, who you end up with as a partner. They can push you or they can kind of keep you complacent. And I love that we get to see that character arc with Violet and Xaden and see how that relationship was able to push her into more.
Yeah, and she really starts to stick up for herself throughout the novel too, and especially with Dane, who I felt like really wanted to make the decision for her. It was never really a conversation that he was having with her. He was just kind of talking at her and telling her what she needed to do because he thought he knew best. And I think that one of the things, like you said, people love about Xaden is that he really encouraged her to make her own choices, which she ended up doing. And I don't mean that to say that it was all because of him, but she really becomes empowered as we go throughout the novel.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously when you're doing stuff like crossing a parapet with one shoe that's like messed up and one shoe that's the proper footwear for the activity you're doing, and you have Jack Barlowe, this guy that's like trying to kill you basically by the balls, and then as you're moving through and you're doing these challenges and a dragon is wanting to bond you and blah blah, like yeah, you're going to start to feel really empowered. You know, you're starting
Mhm.
to push yourself and take actions that are going to give you that self-esteem. It's going to give you that confidence that you didn't know you had. So I think that Xaden, like Dane was just whiny at like go back to what you know, and then she has her friends and herself pushing her, and then finally kind of she gets together with Xaden and he pushes her even more.
Yeah,
It's
Xaden
she's
is,
like, yeah.
he's very dreamy. He's a
Well, yeah, no, I think he's dreamy, but I also think he's like a secure partner for someone who's
Mhm.
maybe feeling insecure, or not that she's feeling insecure, but I think she, you know, he's a strong presence and reminder to her that she is capable and is deserving of being there. Like there's a few times that he reminds her like two dragons bonded you. Like
Mhm.
you know, and still at that point in the book, Dane's like, okay, well, let's you got this far by luck. Let's not you didn't get this far by luck. You're like there's some skill there.
Yeah, she's actually doing it, which is this is a perfect segue because the first kind of task that these students have to do before they can even do the threshing, which is where they meet a dragon, is do this gauntlet, which is the most insane obstacle course. A lot of people, like Cecylia said, people die on this part as well. And I think one of my favorite parts of that scene is, you know, Violet, a lot of people are underestimating her. She gets through it not only with her physical skill, but because she's smart. And, you know, she uses a dagger at the very end to help her get through one of the challenges because she brought that dagger with her across the parapet. It was part of her. And another student challenges her completion of this gauntlet based on her using the dagger. And even though her and Xaden are not, you know, they're certainly not in a relationship at this point, they're not close to one another. He's the first person to kind of say, nope, this is fair. She completed it to task. That's what she was asked
Right.
to
Like she
do.
out just because she outsmarted you doesn't mean
Yeah. And he, even though he's not supposed to like her, he's like, well, she did what she needed to do to get through and no rules were broken. And if you have a problem with breaking the rules, you can bring it to me. Which,
which gives us some insight further. Like that's kind of, you know, as we learn that he's supposedly on the side that is like evil and is against what is morally correct. It's interesting to look back in the novel and see those different pinpoints of his character where actually he's showing us that his character is like, no, it doesn't matter if I like the person or not. What's right is right, what's fair is fair. This was technically done in a way that completes the goal, the objective. So you see through his actions throughout the novel, even though we're being told that he is like for a cause that we shouldn't be supporting, you see where his character is at and where his head is at. And it's kind of trust hints to trust him because it doesn't matter, you know, if he's presented the evidence, he's making these choices that are like, no, this is what's right. Even though he tells us that he's like the worst guy ever.
right. And also just him sticking up for me, I would trust him immediately. Violet has way better spidey senses than me. So I'd be like, thank you. Listen to anything he said. But it's from there, you know, the next big task is moving into the threshing, which is when the students then
Which is a
line up.
crazy name. Do we Google
Insane.
what does that even mean? The
Let's Google
threshing.
the threshing.
It sounds inappropriate.
I don't know if I like the dictionary result.
Revolving. Oh, oh my God. Separate grain from plant, typically with a flail or by the action of a revolving mechanism. Revolving mechanism. Revolving mechanism. Oh, okay. In the Bible, it means in the threshing floor in scripture is a place of separation and revelation.
Okay.
So maybe Rebecca Yarros is a Jesus girly because that makes sense for like what we see. Oh,
Well,
to separate seed from a harvested plant. So
they're weeding them out, right?
there you go.
Yeah. They're just weeding through them. And so they have to go through. There's all these dragons there. There's all these rules about how to approach the dragons because they can and they will eat you. If you go up to them the wrong way, they will eat you. They'll light you on fire. They don't think twice. So your outcomes through the threshing are bond with a dragon, which is good, get flame thrown or eaten, which is bad, or you can also be unbonded, which kind of puts a pause on your studies. You kind of get like held back sort of and have to do it again. But this is actually in the book, this is probably my favorite scene with Violet. I think we get a lot of foreshadowing here, but Jack Barlowe and two other people essentially hear about this golden dragon, and their first instinct is to kill it and attack it. And Violet feels so strongly against this that she doesn't even think about that she needs to bond a dragon. She just goes to save this little golden dragon, which she does successsly. There's a standoff between.
This dragon is still like 10 feet tall or something. Like little.
I'm like, this little baby dragon.
This like little tiny baby dragon. I was telling Matt earlier. It was like this little tiny baby dragon, which is like 10 feet tall.
She's so cute.
And could blast you to smithereens.
Yes. Very powerful dragon. There's a very physical confrontation between these characters, and Violet is able to save who we meet is Andarna, this small little baby golden dragon. And in that moment, she also meets Tarn, who is this giant black dragon. The black dragons are a little more rare, and she bonds with both of these dragons. And the way that the bonds happen is essentially the dragons can talk to the writer. So they're kind of like talking into her mind, and she's talking back. But this is the first time that someone has ever bonded two dragons before. And it is like, I think my favorite part of the whole book is when she walks up at the end to tell them who she's bonded, and Andarna goes, and tell them my name. Tell them who I am too. That like gives me full body goosebumps every time I read it. It's my favorite part.
My favorite is in the second book when she goes, "Can you carry a luminary?" And Taryn goes, "That question insults me." And then she goes, "Can you carry a luminary while insulted?"
She's so sassy, Robot. She really is. And
your moment is very wholesome. Mine's
yes.
Like, God, I love that she's kind of a bitch.
She does. She goes through like, she's so like younger. She's like a hatchling in the first book. And then in the second book, she's kind of like this angsty teen. And she's quick with it. She's got quick little quips that she gives to pretty much everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But that's such a great quote. When Violet bonds with Tarn, this kind of creates a very unique bond between Violet and Xaden. And that's because Xaden's dragon is Sigale, and Sigale is Tarn's mate. So now you've got these two people that are essentially forced to be together because their dragons are mates. And they kind of have to work through their, I don't even know if dislike is the right word, but their kind of disdain or uncertainty of one another for the sake of their two dragons. Which also wild that like their dragon emotions come down onto them. So several of the summaries I was kind of like looking at and revisiting.
I feel like that's probably similar to me the week before my period. I feel like I probably just experienced dragon emotions. So I can relate, and it's intense.
That is so funny because I was going to be like about how the dragons got horny and made everybody else feel that way too.
That was crazy. Well, and I remember when I was reading that part, I'm like, okay, because I don't love a forced proximity trope. I think that's probably my own trauma. I always want to know that someone is around me because they want to be around me.
Mm-hmm.
So the forced proximity trope like makes me anxious. Like, does everybody want to be here? Is everyone consenting to this? And I think with that, I was nervous. Me, Violet Sorrengail, was like, does he really like me, or is it just his dragon? Because that you don't know someone's intentions when they're bonded to you in a forced proximity way. So obviously it ends up fine, and Satan's amazing, but I was definitely concerned. I had these like insecurities that I was projecting onto our main character throughout that whole bonding process. And when their dragons were like going at it and they were feeling the intensity of that emotion, I was like, do you guys want to be doing this right now? Like, I wanted to kind of jump in and just make sure, is everybody okay with this? Or do I need to bring her home, give her some water? I don't think that you guys, your guys's dragons are a little bit too intense right now. It's almost like a girl at a bar and you're like, actually, you're going to come home with me and you're going to make this decision in the morning. Kind of, that was, I wanted to jump in the book and be like, Violet, let's leave the bar. Let's go back to our room. I'll tuck you in and give you a glass of water. Because with the dragon intensity thing, I was like, this is, uh-oh.
Yeah, I did not see that as a, like, I was reading that for the first time and thought, what a crazy plot point, because I just never would have thought.
I was like, this is so dark and scary. And then since then, I've read about like siblings hooking up. So I've really got, that's like, Fourth Wing was a really long time ago for me. That was early on. I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah, you're like,
this is crossing some moral boundaries. And then now I've read some things that I couldn't tell my grandmother.
No.
So
certainly not. And it's funny because around this time too, she kind of comes to her relationship with Dane kind of comes to a head, because they were,
I was so glad when they kissed and nothing happened. And she was like,
thank
actually,
goodness.
I have the ick. I was like,
yeah. And it was, I thought that was interesting for her as a character, because she shares this kiss with Dane and she's like, ugh, like, no, this is not right. Like, I don't
he has
feel
like a little
anything.
bit bad breath, I think.
Yeah, like he's giving her the ick immediately. And I thought that was interesting, because she had kind of described sometimes like maybe having this sort of childhood crush on him. She's known him for so long.
Yeah.
And then this happens, and she's at least got the wherewithal to be like, no, thank you.
I know, go her, honestly, because I would commit to the bit. If I had a childhood crush and I kissed them for the first time and felt the ick, I swear to God, I would just like ride that till the wheels fell off, because that's too embarrassing. My pride can't get in the way of being like, guys, actually, this guy that I've spent 30 years, I mean, I know she's like, what, 19? But like this guy that I've spent 30 years crushing on, I actually don't even, like, kissing him was awkward. I could never.
Oh yeah, you'd have to gaslight. You'd be like,
because I'm fake.
I'm stressed because of everything going on around me. It's me. I should do it again, because then it'll be
I would
better.
Commit to that bit. So good for her, truly. She was like, she's such a self-aware queen. She was like, actually, this is not for me, and this is not serving me anymore, so I'm gonna put it down. And I'm like, I'm gonna hold it till it dies. I'm gonna hold this thing until it bites me. That's me. So
yeah, and she told it. She was like upfront about it right away. I mean, she was just kind of like, no thanks. That was weird.
That I would like literally stop texting him back. I would stop like writing him little, whatever they do, like little scribe letters to each other. Yeah. I would like stop writing him letters. He'd be like, this is so weird because I feel like it went well. And I would be like, yeah, I can see how he would also think that went well. Like he would be like, that's weird. We like went on a date, we kissed, and then she never talked to me again. Whereas Violet's like, actually, I'm going to communicate my feelings immediately.
Yeah, good for her, because no way too complicated.
Yeah,
you're right.
Especially ghosting, how old is she? 22? 19?
Yeah, let me Google. Let's find out.
I'd have probably slept with him.
Yeah, that's the next logical step.
I don't really like him, but I can't hurt his feelings.
I might like him if I do this.
Yeah, maybe, because I've spent my whole life pretending like this is the best.
Okay, she's 20 in Fourth Wing.
Okay, yeah.
That's crazy. I would never have, at 20? No way. Absolutely not. Well, so after the Dane kiss and flub, sorry to Dane.
Kiss and flub.
after Dane flubs it, he does not seal the deal. He does not close it at all. Once you bond a dragon, essentially the riders know that the dragons will kind of funnel this kind of power into them. And again, I'm speaking very generally here, but when they are learning to communicate with the dragon and they're learning to manifest this power, it comes out as what's called a signet. And some signets, I think, are more common than others. Some of them are very dangerous. You can die for having a certain type of signet. But through the rest of the book, we're essentially kind of seeing the dragon riders, we're seeing them learn what their signet is, when it manifests, and then how they were going to learn to control it. And that's through various lessons and things like that. At this point, I think that several other people get their signets, but Violet's ends up ultimately being lightning. And it takes her a little bit of time to wield that. I think that Xaden knows, okay, there's kind of some extra boundaries I've got to put in place here, because he's higher up. He's he's about to graduate this year. This is his last year. So he needs to make sure that Violet is protected and safe, because if something happens to her, something would happen to Taryn, which would then happen to Sigale, which would then happen to him, because as a reminder, all of the dragons and their riders are bonded, and these two dragons are bonded together. So in the midst of that, Xaden assigns to Violet basically a childhood friend of his named Liam, who's one of the, I think, most favorite characters throughout the book.
Oh,
People love Liam. And essentially
everyone
his,
hold space for Liam
yeah,
for
please hold
3
space for
seconds.
Liam. And his job is basically to protect Violet. He's like her bodyguard. And I think he does this as respectfully as possible, because Violet, again, kind of like talking about consent earlier, Violet does not like this. She doesn't want the bodyguard. She really, detests this because she doesn't think she needs protecting. And I think Liam did a really good job of creating that boundary of letting her kind of feel like she had her space, but also doing what Xaden asked of him, and just being a really good friend in the process too.
Yeah.
You're like at the halfway point through the book now, and really as you're moving forward, the cadets are learning how to do hand-to-hand combat. They are fighting each other. Violet is so sneaky and kind of smart, because she is understanding that she essentially needs to do some critical thinking to get ahead of the opponent she's facing physically, because they are stronger than her. So she, poisons several people. There's again this continued confrontation with Jack Barlowe. He really has it out for Violet, and I didn't really get a sense of why, other than he's just a jerk and had it out for her.
Well, he finds her to be too weak. And the thing is,
Yes.
in the Riders Quadrant, if someone like you are only as strong as your weakest link. So his initial thing on the parapet, he doesn't want her to get across, because he's like, she will harm us in the long run. Like, she's not going to be able to be tough enough to be a rider, to be here to survive. So we need to just kind of like pluck off the weak ones as we can, because he flung somebody else off the parapet. So that's the reason. The reason that we know of is because she's not going to be able to do it. She's too weak.
Yes. Which, I mean, I guess if you're subscribing by the rules of the college, then like, okay, fair point.
I think Jack Barlowe is kind of a really he's a villain for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm excited for that character, and I'm excited to see him in Onyx Storm, because we're introduced to someone who he's very aggressive with his motives, but he has motives that are rooted in the societal structure that he's grown up around.
Mm-hmm.
Like, essentially his motives are survival and strength, and that's because of what he's grown up around and what he's been taught and what he knows to be true about the dynamics of the War College. So that's interesting one. And then Jack Barlowe is like I'm so proud of that theory that was a theory that I was right about. There's like a TikTok sound where she's like singing like, I was right.
Yeah.
That was me, because when he was killed off in 4th Wing, I was like, that guy's not dead. I think I texted like 12 people, and I was guys, Jack Barlowe is not dead. We're going to see more of him, because one, he wasn't enough of a villain. Like, he was just kind of
like a jerk,
obnoxious, and then like obnoxiously trying to kill the main character. And then also we never saw a body. So he falls from this like, she's like, nobody could ever have survived the fall that just happened.
Yeah, and no one could ever survive the lightning wielding strike I just did and this stuff.
She's
even
like,
though I did it for the first time.
And then I was like, just the fact that was pointed out, no one can ever survive this, and then we didn't directly see a body. I was like, because he's not dead, there's no way.
Oh yeah.
And he's bonded to a dragon or whatever, but so his dragon like carried him off. But I'm really excited, because I think that Jack Barlowe is going to have a very strong presence in Onyx Storm. And I think that he's going to be really critical in us finding out more about the Venin hierarchy and the Venin politics and how that power works and everything, because he's advancing his way through the Venin hierarchy right now. But I also think that it will be interesting to hear why and how his dynamic changed, because when he's running across the parapet at first, he's described as having red rings around his eyes, and some characters are described as having red rings around their eyes early on in 4th Wing, and he's trying to kill her then, but then he has a change of tune later on in the books. He saves her life in Iron Flame, and to go from wanting to kill her and saving her life in Iron Flame while having the red hum. So we can assume, which I thought everybody was just 420 friendly that had the red ring around their eye, but finding out that that actually means that they're venom, and then looking back on the characters that had that pointed out, we can assume Jack Barlowe was venom the whole time. So I will be interested to hear in the venom hierarchy at what point is he's like going for blood very early on, like baby venom, like kill, and then he's like, I'm gonna kill everybody, and then he's like, in the end of Iron Flame, he's like, and from the little blurb of Onyx Storm that we've seen so far, where he's talking to Xaden, he's basically saying the higher ups want her, and that's implying that they want Violet alive and not dead. So I think that he's going to be really critical in us seeing where in the venom journey that changes. Like, where do you go from being this like bloodthirsty baby venom to understanding what you need to do to continue to access power? And Alex is actually speechless right now, so I'm just going to keep going with this whole thing.
Please.
I think that Violet is so critical because either she's pure power herself. I've seen that theory floating around. But I think the one that's really good, and it's one that we had sent back and forth ahead of this film, is that, you know, we know that Violet has not really accessed her full power. And it seems like leadership understands what her full power is. And so I think that it's kind of common knowledge by now in the book, not to us as the reader, but to like the venom hierarchy and to Navarre's leadership and etc., that Violet can actually, her signet or her lightning wielder, she's not a lightning wielder, she can actually just access power from the sky. And that is in a direct contrast to venom pulling from the ground. The ground, we've seen in several parts of the book, becomes lifeless once they kind of like, it can be dried up. You can like suck everything from the ground. But with Violet channeling from the sky with things like weather and the sun, those are energy sources that you can't drain. So she's essentially accessing, her is like accessing a full vessel and constant source of power and source of energy. So there's got to be a point where there's a reason that they want her, but there's also a reason they want her alive. Because if she was just unusable to them, but super ultra powerful, they would only be trying to kill her. But I think we've seen too much to suggest that they want her alive.
I will say you've blown my mind about Jack Barlowe, because I did not even pick up on him potentially being venom in the first book.
I think he's been venom the whole time. Yeah.
Which would make so much sense.
But it's confusing for why he wanted to unalive her and then why he saved
and maybe
her life.
And maybe it's because they talk about the venom, like you have to, like how General Sorengale, she gets the correspondence that says there's no cure, there's just control. So maybe in the time he's being venom, he's learning how to control those things, and he's also communicating with the people who are higher up in the venom hierarchy, which I think there are several. I have like several other people that I think are also venom that are there, and that might be the reason why he changes his mind. But I agree with you. I think he's going to be a very prominent character in Onyx Storm. And I think that I don't know if sympathetic is the right word, but I think that his point of view may make people consider why the venom are doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think he's going to give us that backstory and that explanation.
I might love him. I might walk away from Onyx Storm loving him, because if he can give us, I love insight into why someone does what they do or blah, 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 whatever. So I think it'll be really cool to see just that access. But also, okay, I was going to say you don't save someone's life just because you're completely heartless. But I guess with the power theory, like he could just be driven fully by power. It'll be interesting to hear if Jack Barlowe has a heart or if he's fully driven by power.
Well, and I think the best part is that I have like kind of like revisiting it. I've been like, is he hot? Could I change him? And like, you don't even have to change him if he's already changing himself.
If
That's
he's
great.
doing it for himself.
He's working hard. This sounds like a guy that
By the
goes to
fifth book,
therapy.
by the fifth book, Jack Barlowe is going to be in therapy, and we're going to be
Yeah.
swooning over him.
I'm gonna be like, great guy, relatable. But like you said earlier, Jack, ultimately, we think that he's dead. We don't see his body. If you're like me, you go, that guy's dead. If you're like Cecylia and you're a good critical thinker, he's probably not. And ultimately, the way that Fourth Wing ends is with the war games. This is the last kind of task that you have to be able to do with your squad in order to pass on to the next year. And kind of in the interim, we've learned that Andarna, she's able to stop time, which is really cool. And Xaden and Violet have hooked up. So we know that they are kind of like in this relationship. This is happening. Do they love each other? We're waiting to see. And at the very end, Dane's father is Colonel Atos, who is very prominent at the school, and he's giving out these assignments. There's a quest that's given to them, but Violet ultimately ends up going with Xaden, and they meet these rebel children in another town that have griffin flyers. And they start talking to Xaden about the venom and the attacks, and things are getting more frequent. And Violet is caught really off guard. She's like, what is happening? Why are you meeting these people? This is not something that Xaden had told her about, and when you're in Navarre and you grow up, you're led to believe that the venom are not real. This is like a fairy tale. It's all made up. And so she's at the end being faced with this realization that venom are real, and most of what she's learned growing up may be a lie. There's this venom attack, and she and the couple people from her quadrant and Xaden that are there have to fight these venom along with the Griffin Riders, in this confrontation that ultimately I think was set up and planned. This was a planned attack in the next town over, but they're trying to save these
I think it
people.
was confirmed.
Yes, so they're trying to save these people, and during this, Liam dies. It's really, really upsetting. He's a great character, and they're very upset about that. But Violet
No,
really,
it's the worst thing ever. And I
yeah,
didn't even, I am still not even over it. It was like, and again, I'm not even over Dylan dying. I was like, that was so unnecessary. That guy had a girl that he was going to propose to.
yeah,
I'm just not over any of the character deaths, but definitely it caught me off guard. But also Liam dying because his dragon went down. I was like,
yes.
come on.
Were you surprised by Rebecca Yarros' choice to kill off a character that had been
Yes,
so?
I
Yeah,
unfollowed her on Instagram at the end of Iron Flame. I'm so over her. She can earn my follow back with Xaden. Not like with it needs to go up from here because
mm-hmm.
the choice to make us fall in love with characters and then kill them off is I understand. I've seen some of her interviews. I understand she's going a realistic route. I am not reading to be realistic. The world is a nightmare right now and
Mm-hmm.
scary and sad and whatever. I want characters to be safe.
Yeah,
I wanted a
absolutely.
fake out.
I am with you because I think I was like, oh yeah, people will die. I just didn't expect this to happen the way that it did. And then even in Iron Flame, when I can talk about that death too, I sometimes feel
Wait,
like it
which
may
one in Iron Flame? In
oh,
Iron
I don't
Flame.
like that General Sorrengail died. I felt like she did the same thing with Liam, which was, for me, I felt a certain type of way about General Sorrengail in Fourth Wing, and then when I got to Iron Flame, I felt completely different about her, and then she died in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it added to the complexity of her character and that
Mm-hmm.
dynamic and her relationship with her children. And I mean, I don't actually ever want a book character to die, but I understood that choice. And I still, even knowing what Rebecca Yarros is trying to do, I'm understanding. Like, I understand the choice just because I don't like it, but
Mm-hmm. Hi, Brandy.
I think that guys, we have to stop talking about the book because Brandy actually didn't read them yet. So,
Spoiler alert.
Brandy, if you're hanging out, you're gonna get spoilers.
Yeah, that I just didn't like that one. I was like, "Ugh, your mom likes you. You guys should get along. My mom's a bitch."
Well, it's hard because I think it reinforces this greater arc of things that
Hmm.
there's this greater theme of grief and how Navarre and citizens handle grief and
Hmm.
how Violet is very against how they're currently handling it. And Violet is feeling resistant to, like, she doesn't know anything else, but she also knows that the way that they're handling grief and loss is wrong. And I think with her mom passing, it's just going to continue to be fuel to change in
Yeah.
how Violet starts to handle grief and loss in her
Hmm.
journey.
I think you're right. It was very profound. And like we've had two major character deaths back to back. So I can only envision what's going to happen in Onyx Storm, but to round out with Fourth Wing, Violet gets injured in this final battle. Once everything is over, there's one Venom that gets away. I'll tell you who I think that is in a minute. Um,
Who
but
do you think it is?
I think that it was either Colonel Atos or Varish.
Oh,
I think both of them are Venom.
didn't we see Varish die? Varish? Professor
Yes,
Varish. Didn't we saw him die though?
we saw him die, but in Fourth Wing, there is at the end of that, there's one of the Venom that flees. He gets away.
Oh.
So I'm wondering if it was Colonel Atos who, in Iron Flame, when they all come back, Violet is looking at him. He's talking to her, and he's basically saying, "You need to keep the Venom a secret. Like, secrets die with people. We're going to kill you if you say anything." And she says that his eyes are rimmed with red as if he had taken some sort of drug. So I think Colonel Atos is definitely Venom, and I think Varish was as well. But with Fourth Wing, Violet wakes up and she is in a completely different location, and she has been healed by none other than her brother Brennan, who we were led to believe and who she was led to believe has been dead for
No,
several
this
years.
cliffhanger stuff is crazy. Ending both books on a cliffhanger. I like the Onyx Storm one. I'm looking it up before I go in because I have read both books front to back and I did not look up the spoiler and I did not look up the ending. I know, surprise. And I've been floored
Yeah.
and I'm over it. I'm reading the last chapter
Yeah.
first for Onyx Storm because my little heart can't take it anymore. The whole journey of reading and not knowing what's going to happen, I sobbed in my kitchen during Iron Flame because I was like, Emily just keeps dying and I
Yeah.
just don't know what's happening. So I'm going to read the end of Onyx Storm because these cliffhangers are crazy. But yeah.
Crazy. And then we had to wait for Iron Flame, which again, I'm going to give you guys very general summary notes because Iron Flame is it's so thick. I'm averaging it's like 3 inches thick. It's a very big book. I think it's safe to say this book has way more politics and world building than Fourth Wing did. When we start Iron Flame, I really, in revisiting this, feel for Violet because she again finds out her brother's alive, and also that Xaden knew, and half of the
Which
people
she doesn't spend enough time on for me. She's like really
agreed.
mad for the wrong reasons. I'm like, what about the fact that your brother's been alive this whole time? But I also do understand why he couldn't, like, it gets complex. I was basically like, if you're gonna be pissed at him for the whole book, you need to include the part where he didn't tell you that your brother was alive. Because like you need
That's
to
the
either
biggest
get over
point.
all of it or not get over all of it. That was where I
Yeah.
was like, why, like, we're still mad at Xaden? Still?
Yeah.
And you're not mad about the brother thing?
That's the whole part that I would get so upset about. So she wakes up. She learns her brother's alive. She's immediately mad at Xaden. She's like, "I can't trust you because you didn't tell me any of the stuff that was going on." Like Cecylia said, she just leaves out the brother part. She's like, "You didn't tell me any of this before we went into it." So they travel back to Basgiath, and when they get there, they kind of show up, and it's really dramatic because they're reading the death roll. They're reading Xaden Riorson. They're reading Violet
It's like
Sortingaro.
at a wedding when they announce the bridesmaids and the bridal party, they bring them in.
Yeah,
They're like
whoop
dancing
whoop.
to like Bruno Mars.
They're wearing sunglasses. They're like coming in the exactly, and
They're like, guys, what dance should we do before? Should we fist bump? Zayden, should we fist
they're
bump or
like,
should
"Should
we
we
hip check?
shimmy? Should we shake?"
Oh my God, should we change riders' leathers? Should we change fighting leathers? I'll wear
Should
girl
we
ones,
jump
you wear, or
over one
I'll wear boy
another?
ones, you wear girl ones.
What is that when they leapfrog? How many weddings have
Yeah,
you been
that
to where
was
they
actually,
leapfrog
they
over one another?
leapfrog or like they switch attire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the
Somebody comes
conversations that we're
in.
having off screen.
Yeah, they come in, somebody chugs a beer. That's always happened. Somebody's got a shotgun something.
It would be
They
Garrick. Garrick would be chugging the Bud Light.
For sure, I agree. You've also learned again at the end of Fourth Wing, but into this book as well, that every time Dane was interacting with Violet, which he was kind of like still, he would like come up and gently caress her face, and she still was like kind of ew. It turns out he was stealing her memories. That is his signet. He was able to look into her mind, see what was going on, and he reported that back to everybody. They get there, and this is the first kind of time where we also get to see, Xaden comes forward. He says what happened during the war games, that they were sent somewhere on purpose. This was a setup. And General Sorrengail gets ticked off. And you see her really get frustrated with Colonel Atos and the other people that are there, and because of the fact that her daughter was involved. And I think that's when, for me, I started to really kind of enjoy her character, because I wasn't getting that vibe from her so much in the first book. Also, at this point, Xaden has graduated, so him and Sagail have been assigned to go work in a town, I believe, called Samara. So now Xaden and Violet have to have this setup where he's not at school, but they still have to see each other like every other week, because their dragons are bonded. And if their dragons don't see each other, then their dragons are going to get ticked off. So her schedule's kind of crazy, because she's going back and forth between Samara and school, or he's coming to school. And in the interim of that, Andarna just decides she's going into her endless sleep. This is what happens when the dragons have to grow up. So we lose out a little bit on our Andarna, because she's got to sleep and rest for a portion of this book so she can become a fully fledged dragon and access her powers. We also meet Varish, who is, I would only describe Varish as the equivalent to Professor Umbridge in Harry Potter. He is the guy Umbridge. He is awful. He immediately has it out for Violet. He like interferes with her plans going to see Xaden. Violet's like getting her backpack searched all the time.
And this is the book we see Rhiannon take a leadership role.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool. And there's some tension between these two friends. I felt coming out of Fourth Wing that we didn't see enough of their friendship for me to like find the depth in it. But I think that's just on me. That's kind of my issue, because if you're thinking about the different things that they're going through together, like right off the bats, another woman is facing a challenge with you, and her reaction is to give you her shoe because she notices that your shoes aren't going. She's been told that by her sisters, who, like, we see this beautiful sibling dynamic. These siblings really look out for each other. Even Brennan, how we believe he's dead the whole time, he's sent this book to Mira that is like, help give this to Violet, like help her through, kind of everyone's clued in on. I understand why Violet starts Iron Flame really mad at everyone, because it just feels like a lot of piling up. First of all, she's losing a lot of people and she's experiencing grief, and she's not being given the tools to handle that properly or in a way that's healing. Then she's finding out that everyone is not being truthful with her. Then she's finding out that she also has to keep these secrets from someone, her friend group, and someone who, like I was saying, this friendship is developed from them going through all these really difficult things together. So someone like Rhiannon, who she's like, I know this person's heart and I know what they would do for me. And now all you people that have been lying to me for 2 books want me to keep this from Rhiannon and people that I went through these very traumatizing experiences with. Like, so I think that friendship developed organically, and I just kind of missed it as a reader. But of course, thinking back on the things that they faced together, and just literally the foot that their friendship started on, which was like, I'm going to give you my shoe because I'm noticing that you might not make it across and I'm going to put myself at a disadvantage to help you. Of course, those women are bonded. So I think seeing that dynamic and seeing them struggle with their communication and their friendship during Iron Flame was difficult. So we see her take a leadership role, which I loved that as well. I think she makes such a great leader. Like, I think she, especially when she finally finds out the truth, she really puts her squad first, and her quadrant first. Like, I hope we see her continue to grow and continue to
Mhm.
take leadership roles as she goes up, because she really like blew me away with her compassion and her ability to lead from, I mean, her ability to ground Violet a few times, like, and remind her this is the cause we're in now and we're in it. Like, forget your little boyfriend. We're
Mhm.
like, so I just was really impressed to see her to take on that role. And I liked seeing her in that leadership role. And I liked seeing how their friendship weathered that,
Yeah,
and how that conflict was able, like, they were able to deepen their friendship and their trust for each other.
for sure. And I think that Rhiannon is a very I think that she's a very strong character, and in referencing what you said about their friendship, her ultimate the thing that she continues to tell Violet is she's like, I know you're keeping stuff from me. I don't really know why, but you and I are friends and I want you to be able to tell me these things. And I'm going to be honest with you, like my feelings are hurt that you're not telling me. And I think that she navigates that very, very compassionately because when, ultimately, when Violet tells her what's going on, it's because Violet's about to get searched. Violet has this it's called an alloy dagger that's with her that if the people that are searching her find this, they're going to know that she's been working to figure out things about Venin and what she needs to defeat the Venin. And Rhiannon never says, I told you so. She doesn't give her a hard time for not coming forward. They really just she sets the precedent of, well, I'm glad that you finally told me. This is what we're going to do moving forward. And I think that that also speaks to her leadership ability based on the fact that, I don't think a leader, like, not, I don't want to say like kick someone when they're down, but maybe like chastises someone for the choices that they made. And I just like the girl power too, like moving forward. I hope that she continues to move up through the ranks. We are also introduced, we see her before, but we're introduced to Jacinia, who is a scribe. And she essentially is going to help Violet and the other riders. They're going to do the research on the Venin to see what they can find. Spoiler alert, they can't find anything in the vaults with any of the any information about the Venin at all. Assassins are starting to come after Violet, during this time period too. So there's a lot going on, and kind of, what I thought was the next kind of major plot point was, like you said earlier, Jack Barlowe returns.
Which is so funny that the moment of reveal was supposed to be when we saw his dragon. And because for Iron Flame, first of all, starts out with all these new characters. I swear to God, they're brand new, and then all their dragons. We're supposed to remember all these characters. We're supposed to remember who they're bonded to. But it was so funny that I just had no clue as a reader what was happening when we see this like red dragon, and Violet is like, "Oh my God, Taryn, tell me it isn't true," basically. And Taryn's like, "I'm checking right now." I'm like, what are we checking? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, guys, side conversations are rude. And then Jack Barlowe, like 2 chapters later, it's like that was a reveal. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, and like he comes back and you find out that the healer guy at school named Nolan. Now, you'll also learn there's a Naolan and then there's Nolan, but Nolan the Mender can't help heal Violet, which he normally does because he's been mending Jack Barlowe the whole time, who just like walks into class. Like that's it. He just
Which,
walks
like,
into the
honestly,
classroom.
I love that energy. That is king shit.
Yeah, I mean he didn't make a scene, he just kind of comes in. So at this point everyone's wheels are turning. They're going, what, holy cow, we can't believe that this happens. And kind of, after this point is when Violet finally comes clean about all of these things with Rhiannon, Sawyer, and Rydok about what's been going on, and their initial reaction is they jump right on board. They're going to help work everything out. So there's kind of like two major parts in this book. The first part ends with, again, this bad guy Varish. He's been training the cadets. Basically, they're going to have to go through interrogation and all this stuff now that they're second years. He essentially, I took it as he just kidnaps Violet and says it's for the premise of an interrogation, and then he tortures her for 5 days. This scene is really, it's a tough one to read because Liam comes kind of in like she's, I would assume she's kind of like hallucinating because she's been through so much trauma at this point, but Liam's there, and I think Liam really is the only reason she gets through this interrogation and this torture. We kind of start to see our Dane character arc because everyone knows something's wrong because Violet's been missing for 5 days, which is unheard of. Varish brings Dane in to read Violet's memories because she's not being truthful. She's not fessing up to what's been going on. And she shows Dane the venom. She shows him all of these things that have been happening, that things have been hidden from him. And they work together to kill Varish and break her out of there. Xaden finally shows up, and that's kind of how the first kind of chunk ends, with Dane really helping her, and a lot of people are then going to flee from the school because they find out that the venom are real. I kind of started to pick up on the fact that Dane was going to probably arc back into trying to get into good graces with Violet. Did that make you have any kind of strong feelings about whether she should be able to like trust him or not?
Yeah, I mean, I still just don't want there to be a love interest there, so I was really like resistant to it. But at first I was like, no, get that guy out of here. Like, I don't even want this on the table as an option because he was initially presented as a love interest, but I am fine. I would actually love to see a Dane character arc if he stays around and is just not in a romantic capacity at all. Like, I don't love the theory that she leans on him in the next book for emotional support, blah, blah, blah. I don't want any of that, but I do think that if Dane experiences a character arc, and similar with Jack Barlowe, I mean, Jack Barlowe could have a character arc for me. Like, I'm here for a villain origin story. And especially, I think that a lot of times when we go into novels, we're conditioned to think good, bad. You know, this is like, there's no gray area.
Mm-hmm.
It's evil or good. And I think that the human experience is just so different than that. So I'd love to see a complex character. I would love to see some justifications for the memory reading. Like, honestly, Dane is operating in a way that he thinks Violet's being brainwashed. He thinks she's, he's thinking that he's helping her. Everything that he's doing so far, from what we can see as readers, like, he thinks that he is saving her almost, or he thinks that he's working for the greater good. He thinks that he's doing what's best. So it'll be interesting to see him continue try to gain that trust and earn that trust back. But for me as a reader, I think he could get there for me, as long as it doesn't get any weird with like love interest or anything like that. I think that Rebecca also admitting in a interview that he's her favorite character, I'm hoping that character arc will be done really well, because obviously she has things in mind and she knows things about Dane, as the author, that we don't know yet. And for him to be her favorite, I think that means like some really exciting things, maybe for a character arc perspective.
Yeah, and I would really like you said, I don't want there to be like some romantic interest there, but I really would my hope is that their friendship kind of gets back to a place where it was, because that's what they talk about in the beginning, that they were childhood friends. And I think that would be a really great way to do that. And especially with, I'm sure it's hard for him too, because he's also been conditioned to believe X, Y, and Z. His dad's obviously
he's unlearning a lot right now,
And so I'm giving him less of a hard time after revisiting this.
I do think in the torture with Professor Varish, I think that there's a couple spots in the book. I also think when you were talking about Rhiannon and how she was able to move the dagger through the wall to like hide it, she'd never moved something through a wall before, or her signet hadn't come forward in that way. But one of the cool theories that we were seeing for the next book, the scene with Professor Varish also made me think of it, or just in the synopsis that you were giving, is that it's potentially one of Violet's second signet, or maybe her initial signet, who knows, is that she can amplify the power of those around her, because there are a few instances in the book where someone is able to access their power in a way that they've never accessed it before, or their power is overwhelming to them, or we see a manifestation of it in some way. And I think that potentially the hallucination with Liam is one of these moments, and it's actually Violet's power. She's amplifying Professor Varish's signet, maybe because his signet is that he can identify people's greatest weaknesses, and he makes the comment to her that he knows that her greatest weakness is those that she loves. So he can see Liam, or he can see that in a way, and so maybe her amplification of his signet is actually bringing that hallucination to life for herself. So it could just be that she was hallucinating because she was being tortured,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be some foreshadowing for what that second signet is, because there are a couple other instances in the book with Rhiannon and I believe Sawyer or Ryddock
Yeah.
where they're actually like overwhelmed by their own power, or they're able to access something that they weren't before.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because there's also a part in the interrogation with Varish. Liam says something and Varish responds to him. So I think that goes to what you're saying, which is something is amplified there. But I love that
Which is
theory.
crazy that if Liam was in the room for Varish as well, he wasn't like, hey, what is this guy doing in here? Like, what are you like? Why are you talking to Liam? That's wild that he just let that one slide. He's
For
like this evil
days.
guy, and then
Yeah.
he's like, oh, hey, Liam.
Like the whole point is to torture you, but this guy
But
can
sure,
stay.
I'll let Liam stay.
Yeah,
I'll
this
let my
is fine.
hallucinations stay.
After this occurs and kind of looking more into signets, and Darna finally wakes up. One of her wings did not grow correctly, and they don't think that she'll ever be able to have somebody ride her. And I think I kind of assumed that her wing not growing correctly was because she did have to like kind of wake up in and out of her endless sleep a handful of times.
Yeah, I thought it was because she drained so much power. She used so much
Mm-hmm.
power so early on in the final battle with
Mm-hmm.
where we see Liam fall forever.
Yes. R.I.P.
Yeah, that was what my assumption.
At this point, so more people are at Ryerson House. Violet's sister Mira, she also comes with other people to join them here, because what they're trying to do essentially is figure out how to kill the Venom. This is kind of becoming the plot point at this point. They understand that there are these ward stones, and the ward stones are powered by the dragons to keep people safe. And we do get another introduction to the Griffin Riders, and here's where we meet Catriona, who goes by Cat, and that's Xaden's ex-fiance. So everybody is kind of going on these like separate little missions, because again, they're trying to figure out whether there's a cure. They're trying to figure out how they can ignite these ward stones to keep their area in Navarre safe. And everybody's kind of working together with this ultimate goal of, you know, getting rid of and protecting their own individual kind of kingdoms from the Venom, with different kind of subplots along the way. Dane ends up helping them too. They find these journals, which is like there's a whole avenue you can go down with the journals, but there are these journals that are really helping them, describing how they need to raise the wards. And you learn that Xaden has a second signet, that he's an intrinsic, which means that he can kind of read the minds and the feelings of other people. You know, we're kind of getting to the ending climax here. There is a reunion between General Sorengale as well as Mira, Violet, and Brennan. And Mira, who's Violet's sister, and General Sorengale, they did not know that Brennan was alive. So this is a really emotional scene too, because it's not necessarily this warm, fluffy kind of reunion. You know, Brennan seems very upset with his mom, and he actually refuses to agree to help Navarre. And I thought that that was interesting, because you could see that it made General Sorengale really emotional. You know, not that she was a person that wore her emotions like outwardly on her sleeve. There really wasn't a coming together of these people. It kind of was still this distant thing.
Yeah, I think that's realistic. You know, I mean, when they go through so much and there's so much at stake, and there's a lot of anger there, there's a lot of resentment. It's not just all better, like snap when you see.
Right.
It's not always like a hug and a kiss and whatever. Sometimes it's like, no, you really hurt me, and I want to continue to hold this boundary. So I think that's just kind of like what we see there. A lot of people are turning it into like maybe Brennan is sinister, maybe he's evil, maybe, and that may be true potentially. But I also think the reality of family dynamics being very complicated, and when someone breaks your heart, sometimes you don't forgive them, no matter what role they play in your life. That is also something that I think we see play out there.
Yeah. And I think that was kind of why her death also felt hard to me, was because, you know, I think I'm always hoping that there's resolution, and knowing that maybe Brennan doesn't get that resolution with his mom, and then she dies. I think that's really difficult, and I think that that's also something that happens to people in real life too, that you lose a loved one, and or somebody that's in your family or a friend, or no matter who it may be, and you never really had, I don't know if closure is the right word, or your relationship wasn't where it was before. I think
Mhm.
that that struck me with her death too, was knowing that it wasn't something that was repaired before she died.
Yeah, and for her as well, I mean, we get a closer, more in-depth look at her character and the reasons that
Mm-hmm.
she does the things she does. And I think it's an interesting look into motherhood as well. With she's a character that has made choices specifically because she thinks it's what will keep her children safe, or it's what will keep her children, undetected, or what's
Mm-hmm.
right for her children. And where we learn at this point in the book that it's not actually always what she thinks is like morally correct. She's actually putting her own values on the back burner to do what she thinks will keep her children protected.
Right. I think that in the end, her intentions were clear. But after this, ultimately what happens is the group realizes that these wyverns, which are essentially kind of the same thing as a dragon, but they're different. They're what the Venom ride. They're not going to attack Basgath until the wards have fallen. Ultimately, I think there's a goal of getting to the hatchling grounds where the newer dragons are. And Violet and her crew leave. They go there because they want to check on the wards. There they find Jack Barlowe. He destroys the wards and basically allows this giant battle to occur between the dragon riders as well as the venin and the wyvern. And then we get some griffin riders that come in to help as well. In quick summary, Jacinia, who's the scribe that's been really working to figure out how to defeat the venin or whether there's a cure, she basically says, there's 7 breeds of dragon that are needed to power these ward stones. And you realize and you learn that Andarna is the 7th breed of dragon, which I thought was like such a cool moment. Just like really feeling like Andarna kind of came into her own, because they kind of see her as like Taryn's little sidekick. But she is revealed to be the 7th breed. She comes in. General Sorengale Sloane, who is Liam's little sister, is a siphon, and she helps General Sorengale siphon all of her power into this ward stone. Andarna helps light it. The wards go up, and they have defeated the venin at this time. They win this battle, with the cliffhanger at the end being that Xaden had turned venin during this battle in order to save Violet. Even though I don't necessarily think that they were like together at the time, like physically, I don't think she was about to be in danger. They were like, why did he even have to turn? Because he wasn't even like physically near her. Like it wasn't an immediate problem that was going to happen.
It's probably like me when I make decisions out of my anxiety. I'm like, oh, this might happen, so I better do X, Y, Z, and then I actually like screw everything up more. That's Xaden in that moment. So
He panicked.
yeah.
That's how Iron Flame ends, is with this giant spoiler that Xaden has become a venin. And Sigale's reaction really hurt my heart. That was really well written.
Yeah, that's so hard
Mm-hmm.
because she like the I chose you. I was like,
I
oh,
know.
you
And
should have chose your man. Like,
yeah.
these human men, you can't trust any of
Cannot
them.
trust them, no. So I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic into the next book, is what is going on with Sigale and Xaden, because
What is the tea? What is the goss?
one
Tell me
of
the 411. I'm a cool reader. You can share.
and I say this because when you hear Varish talk about Solus, his dragon, he talks about how his dragon, like he's in control. That's when he describes his relationship with his dragon, he's in control. So when I think of the venin being, because we know that the venin are creating the wyverns through the runes, but it's like really funneling from them. So if they die, if the venin die, their wyvern die. So I think that if you follow that logic, there's a real chance that Sigale may not be in danger, but I think Taryn is going to have to step in between them, following the logic that a Venin controls their dragon or their wyvern, and that he's going to have to fight like how much control he's exerting over Sigale, because that dynamic is going to flip. And I think that in the third book, I think that she's going to have to break the bond.
Which
I
I don't
don't
know what that means for Zayden's life.
right, because if he's a Venin now, can she break the bond and he survives?
Stay tuned, everybody.
But that's all I got.
Nice.
Yeah. We're very excited for the release of Onyx Storm, and definitely we'll have to circle back after we read it to see whether any of our predictions came true, how much Jack Barlowe we really had, and what happened with Xaden and Violet's relationship, and unfortunately who else is going to die. I'm worried more about the dragons than I am about the people, I think. But that's all we have for today. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Shelf Absorbed Podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.